So with that, I'm going to ask, of course, the first question to Ms. Alia. As to if you were to look at, and with your experience across public, private sectors, across multiple industries, be it telecom, banking, how do you think this genesis of digital transformation or a digital-driven business, how have you seen that happen in the last 20 years? And why do you think this time is a pivotal time for Pakistan to really take this on head on?
All right, thank you very much for this. I think the transformation, when you look at Pakistan specifically, has been somewhat slow. First and foremost reason, I think, is that we are still stuck in a pretty much post-industrial mindset and framework. And getting out of that becomes more and more difficult because the leaders right now everywhere are really not born into the digital world. They have adapted it and they are sort of immigrants into it. They have achieved success and knowledge based on the previous frameworks that were present. And the current framework has suddenly completely transformed, and it's highly disruptive as well. Now, when we look at it globally, the global frameworks, of course, are changing exponentially. Whereas in Pakistan, some industries see that happening at a faster pace than others, and some industries are way behind. So there's a lot of disparity within Pakistan, at least in the whole framework and how digital sort of pathways are being made by organizations. Essential component, I think, which really is the core of all of these areas is change. And change is brought about by people. Whether it's technology or data or disruption, everything related to these elements is brought in and handled and maneuvered, so to speak, also by people. So when we look at digitalization of a particular industry, how we are actually looking at the strategy, and earlier I think Ali and Fatima also talked about the strategic frameworks and what we have right now. These require a lot of thought because what we require are to look at the enablers, and technology being one of them, but the skills and the upskilling being another. Then how we actually take this journey forward and implement this through various skill upgradations, various strategies, looking at culture, because culture really is at the bottom of all these changes that we want to have in organizations. So it's a really holistic 360-degree interventions that are required to amplify any kind of potential people have and organizations have.
Thank you for that. And I think the two key words that you mentioned there were change and disruption. And I'd like to move on to Dr. Saab now, because who has seen more change and disruption than, say, the healthcare business, and during the pandemic? So, Dr. Saab, what is your take on what has happened in the last 1 year, and how have you tried to gear up your organizations? And to be honest, have you found that support from the ecosystem which exists not only in this room, but outside even?
Yeah. Thank you, Fawad. And as you have rightly pointed out and mentioned, that we, healthcare and pharma being a part of healthcare industry, we were kind of at the epicenter of this COVID wave. And I still remember when it hit us, I was to, from a personal experience, I was to travel for one of our partners' meeting to Milan. And this was precisely, I think, 10th of March. And we were planning in end Feb. And COVID had hit we did not realize, a colleague of mine was pestering me, okay, it will be all safe. But suddenly, come February, and all hell broke loose across the world. And, thankfully, I didn't go there. Otherwise, I would have been there for quite some time, as most of people found out.
Only a few months.
Yeah.
Your employees would have been happy.
Probably. Yes, that is something that probably, and some of them are here, so they can tell you better. But the thing is, the pharmaceutical and the healthcare industry, we have multiple challenges. First of all, from our organizations, let's say the pharmaceuticals perspective, we have our team going to the doctors and, engaging them about the benefits of the products and how different products are needed and the solutions, medical solutions that we take to the doctors. So suddenly one fine morning, you can't reach your customers. So I still remember 8th of March, all our field staff, which is close to about 1,500 of them, they were at home so we first, shoot out an advisory and then everybody in the pharmaceutical industry, because obviously hospitals and doctors are the major area from where you'll get the disease. The second challenge was, in addition to our teams not being how to reach to the customers. And in this point in time, Fawad, you can imagine that since now we have a benefit of hindsight. But in that point in time, neither doctors I got in contact with, hospitals, or other healthcare related industries were ready or have comprehended the challenge that was in front of them. So we would be, required as a pharmaceutical industry to not only educate the medical community, from doctors to nurses to hospital staff, etc., but at the same time partner with them in combating this challenge, whatever it was a requirement of all these things that I am wearing right now, to the sanitizers, to the products which should be available for the patients, because our ultimate consumer was the patient. That when the doctor and the patient bridge was also broken, because the patient couldn't go to the doctors, the hospitals and OPDs across Pakistan were shut down. So we have three, and then we had these channels, what we call, as you call them, pharmacies or chemists or medical stores, because the products are available there. So the first challenge that we faced was to stock up enough medication so that it does not have a run on, as they say, the run on the bank, the run on the pharmacy. Because all the chronic care patients, like patients having diabetes, heart diseases, etc., the global data was suggesting that they were the most vulnerable to this COVID. And the fatalities globally have been, and these are the patients who do not in Pakistan stock up medicine. We get medicines and we take medicine for 2 days or 3 days, or even from a pharmacy, we have this practice. So these multi-pronged of challenges, and that kind of compelled us, we could not shut down our factories. So for challenge internally was that we could not shut our factories. We could not ask our people to work from home because the products cannot be manufactured at home. And since the factory staff was coming in, all of the leadership team, including me, we decided we had, some of our staff, we had asked them to work from home. But me, along with my direct reports and a handful of, about 20 leadership team, we continue to come to offices from 8th March till today. We continue to just to blast it. But I'm just throwing away the challenges that we have. And what I would like to see is, because in Pakistan, and we all know, 70% of healthcare is being provided by the private sector. I am 100% sure that more than 90% of the people who are sitting in this, those and their loved ones had not gone to a public sector hospital for quite some time. So that was an additional challenge for the healthcare industry. How to reach to the doctors, how to get medications. It's a long story, how we did it, but that's what those are some of the challenges that healthcare industry
But
faces.
if I were to ask you, now that something like a pandemic can come back again, right?
Yeah.
And it's in a different form. How would you now look at digitization or a digital strategy being at the core of, say, the business continuity plan? And what would be some of the priorities that you would set out to say, guys, and to say to your leadership team, guys, these are some of the things that we need to do in the next 2 years to make sure if the pandemic comes back in a different shape or form, we are ready and much stronger to reach and meet the consumer needs?
Thankfully, we were connected to the doctors digitally. That was started by pharmaceutical industry. Since we work remotely, so most of our people are digitally connected to the organizations through tablets and specialized softwares, etc., because they need give a constant source of information to the doctors, and we are digitally connected to the doctors. So that is the loop which the industry, or at least major pharmaceuticals or bigger players, have already formulated before the pandemic hit. But after the pandemic, when it has hit us, I think the other loop about the consumer and information to, or I'm calling patients as consumer, but patients, that loop has to be, so things like telemedicine, things like AI supporting them, and things like what is called as the Internet of Medical Things. The Internet of Medical Things, it's probably a new term for most of the audience. That means all these wearables that you have, so that, these watches that we are wearing right now, and by the way, in 2019, there were $24 billion of these wearable watches which were purchased globally. They can store and then transmit a lot of data regarding the patient's care. So remote patient monitoring, so that the doctors can monitor the patients at their places, because something like a pandemic when it hit, a lot of patients cannot commute to the, so telemedicine and Internet of Medical Things, those are more relevant to our part of the world, whereas the other part of the world, they are working on AI. And in fact, the vaccines that you see, they were brought in about in a year's time period. Previously, they used to take decades to develop this vaccine. Yeah. They were brought here because of the AI being used in the R&D sector.
Very good. So I think some of the things which were far-flung, you wouldn't have thought about ever, those things have now become reality, and you're investing heavily in building those capacities. I think that's the key takeaway. Let's move and slide to marketing. And Khurram, you being in a place where you were very close to the consumer action, with nutrition and healthy diets becoming really big. Have you seen of course, you would have seen a spike during the pandemic, but let's not talk about the pandemic. Let's talk about what's happening now. What are some of the changes that you're seeing are here for good, and how have you adapted Fauji Foods, say, digital strategy to make sure you are at the forefront of meeting the consumer needs in the sectors or in the segments that you play?
Thank you very much, Fawad. Before coming to the question, I would just try to link up with what Alia and Dr. Shahzad just said. Yeah, Alia said a couple of very powerful words, which was change and the digital disruption. And then Dr. Shahzad elaborated that how the healthcare got fast-tracked. Now, I will try to broaden the conversation a bit, because Pakistan, as sitting in this room, we all understand that the digital fast tracking is so important in Pakistan as in the rest of the world, and we were kind of lagging behind versus most parts of the world in terms of the digital transformation in its natural progression. COVID, this virus has actually challenged the fundamental instincts of human being and the human society. Because our natural instinct is when somebody is sick, when somebody is in trouble, we would go and we will try to help them out. That could not happen. In Pakistan, the very, very important part is, and I was just, there's a very, very accomplished philosopher, historian, and he doesn't professes that the things that he talks about in terms of the extremist views that he has on the future evolution and the 21st century challenges, Yuval Harari. So he talked about this disruption, the digital disruption, in a very different manner. And he said that, and it's not about that, as you rightly said, that as the more jobs will get redundant because of the automation, the new jobs will create. And the human society in particular, and Pakistan in general, as this fast tracking of digital transformation would happen, unlike the industrial revolution in the 19th century, whereby a couple of countries, the Japan and the Great Britain, took lead on that, and they tried to create that global colonialization in terms of capturing and exploiting the workforce. We will be heading towards a time where it would not be about exploitation, but it would be about the uselessness of the resources. So as we would move ahead with the automation that Ali talked about, as we moved closer in terms of understanding our target consumer from an FFCG world or from the business leader's point of view, It is also very important that as thought leaders, we understand that how the human skill development would evolve post-COVID, and which was happening in its evolutionary form in the world, but in Pakistan it would happen now. And the country was not very ready. So we will create jobs. For an example, if I am a truck driver of a 50-year age and the driverless cars come in, there would be more jobs created in the software industry or in the yoga that our dear friend had just gave us a bit of illustration to that. But what is the skill, the human development indexation, and how it would evolve that? So to me, that is a very, very important question. Now coming back to what is going to happen in the health and nutrition, I think all the food businesses and all the packaged food businesses got a very good traction, not for the right reasons, but definitely a good traction. The global trends are really, really changing. From treating yourself, and we have seen a beautiful example of the Cadbury, but the journal Consumer Perception in Pakistan even, there are a couple of categories that consumers have added to their basic necessities. One of that is the cereal and the other is the yogurt. So the immunity, the fortification, the gut, the digestion, prebiotics, probiotics, these are very, very strong trends that would emerge, and I think like the businesses that would capitalize and understand the consumer needs and disseminate the messages in a way that a couple of examples we have shown in Jazz and also for the Cadbury is going to be very, very meaningful and significant.
So it's really about getting the consumer signal as to what's trending and then actioning through, of course, creating the right product, but equally then creating awareness through digital marketing so that the message dissipates or disseminates quickly. I think that's the key takeout. I think what I'm going to ask you guys in the crowd, especially business leaders, is, and I'm going to move and pivot slightly to a different tack, is what are some of the challenges that you guys feel exist in your organizations, and I'd like to hear them, around digital strategies. How do you guys create your digital strategies today? Do you go on the internet and just Google? Do you talk about terms which are fashionable right now? Or do you really work with partners? Some of them, the names are out there. Who helps you in creating that digital strategy? Do you even have a digital strategy? And I think that's the question that I would like to come to, that we've been talking about digitization and everything, but the reality of a business in Pakistan is that we've got so many other regulatory, business challenges, or at times political, socioeconomic instability, that digitization at times does not come to the forefront. And more importantly, it really comes down to how much monies we are investing, say, in upskilling people, in digitizing operations, and in digital marketing. If I can get a sense, what are some of the resources that your organizations are putting in digitization? And do you think is that enough? And if it's not enough, in your view, what do you want to do about it to drive differently so that people here can kind of understand what's at stake here in terms of really the money out there that can help power digitization in your organization?
I would like to answer this. So I think there are two very key elements here, people and processes. So two elements backed by technology. So all three require, obviously, upskilling, reskilling. You need a complete new dimension in all of these areas. And for that, it's really important that organizations are able to and willing to invest in all three areas. The challenge, I think, comes more not on the digital side and digital platforms and technology, but more on the human element and upskilling. And this is actually one of the major challenges, at least I can talk about BOP, where we are investing exponentially in all three areas. And the reason and the logic is that there are three elements that you need to have. The first, of course, is that we need to look at the mindset. And when we talk about mindset, which I talked about earlier, we need to approach all these areas with a design thinking element embedded into it. The second component is, of course, of agility. So with design thinking, you need to be extremely agile. And the third element, which is extremely and most important, is how we learn from our failures. Because when we do both these elements, and we are doing it for the first time in a lot of areas, there will be a lot of failures, there will be a lot of mistakes. So learning from mistakes has to be a very key element of how we approach the whole framework of digital,
This is the strategization.
strategization.
I'd like
essentially.
to add what Alia has already said. And I think that in addition to, understanding all of this, the organizations now need to understand the need of creating organizations within in itself, which is focused towards that. So our organizations, we have created what is called as the business transformation. So a business transformation division, and we've funded it, not only funded it because the two areas, peoples and processes that Ali alluded to, we are also, in addition, faced to the consumers and our customers, who are doctors, and both of them had different needs. So all these 4 areas, and we've created an organization called Business Transformation within we've funded it, staffed it appropriately. Our Chief Digital Transformation Officer is also here. Yeah. And we've partnered with, one of the keys for companies like healthcare, et cetera, is because this is new to us. So we are partnering with various partners, including Ernst & Young and others, to understand how to get the customers' insight in this time of age, and then formulate an appropriate digital, not only a digital strategy, but a roadmap, 2 or 3 years, because this is not something which is going to go. Pandemic today, we are learning that the 3rd wave is hitting us. Yes. We are also learning, I was traveling, and we also learned that the 2 shots of vaccines that people are having is not enough. And they are now talking about a 3rd shot. Yeah. And they are also talking about even when one gets vaccinated, one can still transmit the disease. So this is not going to go anywhere in the near future, and it's going to stay.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think one thing is very, very obvious here, that e-commerce has increased, but, and I will not be specific in terms of what the Fauji Foods or the Noorpur has done, but I would be generalizing it in terms of what the FMCGs have done in general. I think in terms of being more, we were always more connected in terms of what's happening in the neighboring countries and in the countries similar to Pakistan. But what has happened generally in the FMCG sector of Pakistan is that we have tried to harmonize, and we have tried to create a lot of harmony and a lot of learning, borrowing from the countries which got into this ahead of us, and which has developed, which has developed the consumer goods category in a way where it can complement to increase the immunity. For an example, Horlicks in India had done the inclusion of a vitamin C, which boosts the immunity of the consumers. There are about 84 new launches in the juices and nectar category, whereby there are high immunity being given to the consumers. There are inclusions of some natural ingredients like turmeric and ginger into that, which gives a bit of a soothing on that. So to me, it's very, very important that it's not only that what's happening in Pakistan, and I think Pakistan is still unfortunately lagging behind. But what is important for responsible businesses is to bring those new trends into the categories. And I think it's not only about the profit making, it's about the general complementation of combating this new virus and the new lifestyle that would emerge post that. So to me, I think that is very important. Everybody has done a lot of digitization. Everybody has gone into the unconventional ways of supplying their vendors. But to me, what is extremely important is that how the organization and how the companies and individuals and the countries take the responsibility in terms of doing something sustainable, substantial, which helps the humanity in general, the businesses in particular, and the humans should be the main beneficiaries of that.
Okay, I'm going to take a lead from what Dr. Saab said, and also what Ali Nasir had spoken in his session, is that digital transformation is not the day job of the entire organization, but for a few. And you've also mentioned, Dr. Saab, that you've created a small department which kind of does that across the enterprise. And I think a lot of companies are doing this now increasingly. But I'd like to hear from the panel, what are your thoughts, and what advice would you give to the company leaders or business leaders out here? In your view, having a specific department doing digital transformation, is that more effective in landing the entire agenda? Or do you think upgrading the entire organization by highlighting a few big priorities around digitization and then working with them so that they also feel part of the journey. Because there's a huge debate going on as to, do you want to create a silo mindset, because people start to get insecure who are not in the digital transformation teams. What are some of the challenges that you think, or what is your view on the approach of digital transformation or digital strategy? Starting with Ms. Alia, please.
Thank you. I think the way we have approached it in our bank is somewhat different, because the first and foremost element that we need to understand is that whenever we create a function or a unit within a specific area, and that could be giving, for us, it could be functionally giving a focus and coordinating with others, and that can work. However, it is extremely important that everybody is literally on the same frequency. The whole organization has to transform internally and externally. So the internal transformation, of course, comes with the people, and the external with the consumers, and how we are approaching consumers in terms of data and data analytics, and how we are also transforming our businesses. So for example, BOP has started looking at creating a challenger bank within the bank, and this is just one of the steps. But in each business segment and in each enabler segment that we have within the bank, we have our agenda pretty much aligned. So each one of us is actually looking at the digitalization of our own functions, especially the people in organizational excellence. They need to convert and transform, because we have millennials, but we have 5 generations working in the organization. And all of them, most of them, the majority are digital immigrants. So they need to be retrained. They need to really look at it from a different mindset. They have to be comfortable. And change in itself is scary. And until and unless we focus on the fears and face them and resolve them, we really cannot have any kind of transformation of any kind, what to say, of digital. So that's where the focus needs to be. So people who are scared to open a computer need to use it on a daily basis for all the services that they require. So that's the internal part of it, and then the external part, of course, goes into all the channels.
Interesting.
So that's how
we
need to look at it.
Yeah, I'd like to say that this is undisputed that the whole organization has to change. Now, what is the pathway of, it is not, let's say I'll give you an example from, I'm borrowing it from marketing. Like creating a customer is the entire organization's job. But you have marketing interface who primarily does this job because they are the experts in that. And the whole organization, then they bring in the customer outside in perspective, etc., and then create a strategy. Similarly, we've taken the similar approach. Because if you leave it to, let's say, as Alia and Khurram has pointed out, that digitalization or transformation has to happen in consumers, people, processes, everything. But all of these people have their own other KPIs, etc., to follow. So by creating this organization, which then helps, and not only helps, but looks at the targets of digitalization or transformation which are being set, and then provide a singular organization-wide focus. And they are mandated to, like the marketing department or a production department is mandated to deliver, certain X number of units based on a forecast. So they are experts, and we have, because as Alia has pointed out, most of us are not digital savvy. So by staffing and creating this organization, which is mandated, and then creating a direct link with the CEO as well as the board. So, this system has a direct link with, not only with me, but also with the board. So that's why we ensure that, this digitalization which has to happen across the organization happens, and these are the guys which are mandated with those KPIs. So their KPIs would not be digitalization of per se, their transformation of the entire organization.
Okay.
So that's our approach.
It's a good parallel that you make between having a specialized skill and a few people, experts, doing that functionally agnostic, enterprise-wide. Yeah. Interesting. Khurram Saab.
To me, I think it's not to create something new, but it's to actually pick up the right trends from something which is naturally evolving in the country. For example, millions of Pakistanis actually rely on Facebook algorithm in terms of getting to know that what's new. Millions of Pakistanis are relying on Google in terms of trying to ascertain what is true. And millions of Pakistanis every day are relying on Daraz and Alibabas in terms of getting what to buy. So to me, I think these...
But the real reliance is on TikTok, if you ask me.
Yeah, the real reliance is on... it's a very fast evolving trend, but it's a bit of immature in that particular bit. So to me, I think it's very, very important that we understand the consumer journey, we understand the underlying consumer needs, and we do it in a very, very responsible manner. Because this is for the first time, the biometric devices that Dr. Saab just alluded, this is for the first time when our information is getting inside the skin from outside the skin. Because right now, my interpretation and my trends are ascertained in terms of what I see, what I do, where I go, what I watch. And this is for the first time when I will be wearing these biometric. And yesterday I was in a meeting with my CEO, and he was giving us a very right feedback. And I was just looking at my bracelet, and I thought that if it was a biometric device, and he would have understood that what I am thinking right now. So we are converging towards an extremely open and transparent society in that particular way. So to me, that's an extremely important that we understand the consumer journey. Health is a very, very big byproduct or a very big key product, primary product of these kind of conversions when we talk of this biotech and infotech amalgamation. Having said that, the privacy is also very, very important. So as a company, I'm happy that I'm understanding the consumer. I have this access tool. I can be very myopic. I can be extremely drone mentality in terms of landing my customized messages to the target audience and do the segmentation. But as a consumer, I am a bit concerned on my privacy because a lot of biotech and information infotech would steal that privacy from me. Getting into the wrong hands, I think we all will have to be cognizant of the fact on that.
But if I were to pin you down on the question, which is, what route do you think is the right route? So we understand the mega trends on technology will come one day or the other. But if you're leading a department, what is your view? Do you need a specialist to tell you what the digital strategy should be? Or you think you and your team is capable enough, well-trained to kind of craft that for your set of products as is today?
Okay, I think like, to me, I don't subscribe to the idea that we need to have, and I think all respect to every different organization, but to me, digital is part of your new role profile across the organization, no matter what you do. Absolutely. Having said that, it's extremely important that we have I was talking to Fawad Saab from Group M. It's extremely important
PhD
to have...
now.
So it is extremely important to have the expert partners on that, so which navigate that. Instead of having a small silo, and that's what also depends on what resources and what means we have. But we have a huge reliance on our expert partner who are the digital media experts, who have the right tools in terms of giving us the consumer understanding. But then we would want digital to be the part of everybody's job across the organization rather than we leave it to one department and then we do the change management on that.
Interesting. I'm going to go to the comments that are coming. I've got a few comments, and they're mostly talking about their vision of the people. But one thing which is coming out interestingly is, and I'd like your views on this, using technology to really create ease for your employees in terms of whether they have to come to office or not, but really giving them the tools and to really help them meet the objective. Is that something that you guys agree with? Is that really the end vision that you have for your organizations and the role that technology can play to create that ease for your employees?
Yeah, I think absolutely. That's, you see, even before that, you need to, from the perspective of the vision and purpose of an organization, you also need to know where you're going. And you need to sort of refocus yourself. We've just gone through a revamp of our vision, mission, looking at what we are, what we want to do. And when you do that, you are basically realigning yourself. So from that perspective also, and I'll just add to the previous discussion, that yes, experts You have the experts, and then you have hands going out to all the functions. That's how we are working on it. And in terms of how we are strategizing on both elements, yes, we have to look at all these dimensions and incorporate them. There's no other way about it.
Okay, Dr. Saab?
Yeah, I think that, in the AC world, as we say, or we are still in, AC means after COVID. So in the AC world, I think it would be a price to entry with the millennial coming in, creating this ease of business, creating a digital platform, and then helping your employees do it. It is a price to enter.
Yeah.
I think it's a given. That is my take on it.
Sure.
Perfectly right. I can't agree more on that. I think like in our lives, we have seen that mobile phones actually blurred the lines between the offices and the house, our homes. And I think that COVID has absolutely removed those lines. So fundamentally, we are looking at a very different workplace. We are looking at the different timings. We are looking at the multiple taskings. So I think it's absolutely a prerequisite. It's not something that we need to have. We have to have it.
So we're almost out of time, but I'm going to ask a controversial question given as to what Khurram said. I'm going to take a lead, and also Dr. Saab, you alluded to it. And I'm now talking to all our vendor partners who are participating in this symposium. You mentioned that for your digital strategy for 2 to 3 years, you depend a lot on few consultants to give you that input. You would depend on certain marketing agencies, creative agencies, and equally HR consultants would also be part of the parcel. The question I want to ask and an answer that I need in a yes or no, are you happy with the quality of input that you get from, currently? And, would you want, the people who are listening to us to kind of reach out to you guys and reach out to the business leaders here to do more? And what would that be? What is that one thing that you'd want the vendor partners to do better for you?
More professional inputs, certainly. We require that.
Okay.
I think improvement is something that we want, and every organizations or a business would want. But answering your question, yes. In Pakistan, we have, wealth of human talent, wealth of good agencies, wealth of good advice. It's just understanding what you're needing and partnering with the right partner. That is the responsibility of the business, I think, and the people who are running the business or a particular department. But we have absolutely top-class people and top-class organizations available. That's my take on it.
Absolutely, yes, from my side as well, because the media partners and the digital partners operating in Pakistan are taking a lot of strength from the Googles and the YouTubes, and that's a real globalization in terms of the co-creation of what's happening. My only take, which I talk to my team and which I talk to myself in Mirror, is that we as clients have to be more open. Those are the experts. They know a lot better than us, and if we listen to them, I think we will be doing much better jobs.
Okay, so thank you for that, guys. Really appreciate it. Very nice and powerful discussions. There are a few comments and questions out there. I don't think we have the time to answer them, but we've got a few, approaches for the question, which is right on the top. How do you prioritize, or which workflow to digitize? I think assess and look at your biggest pain point. What is giving the biggest inefficiency, taking up most of your time? That's the problem or the process that you should technically digitize. And the second question is around B2B marketing. It's a class of its own. You can talk hours about it. It's in its infancy, if you ask me. So a lot more to be done, because we still haven't scratched the B2C part, which we'll talk about, I think, in the latter half. I thank you guys again.
Thank you
and
very
before
much.
we officially conclude this panel, I'd also like to thank the organizers for doing this. And there's a running joke between myself and Ali from AIM, is that every time he says this conference is happening, COVID starts to pick up. And now we're practically in the middle of the third wave, I'm told, and Allah ka shukr, this has happened. Hopefully things will be for the better. So thank you, and for your team, and if I can have a round of applause for the great work that their team has put up in putting this together so that these messages can come to you. And with that, thank you everyone.
Thank you, Fawad.
And good luck with the next 2 days of the session. Thank you.